Well, the archive references back to moments and people and events long before I started collecting materials as a film curator, specializing in Pan-African cinema in the early 1980s, more than 33 years ago. I've organized and I've programmed film festivals and film-related events over that period on 5 continents that share a focus, festivals that share a focus on films and filmmakers and cultural expression of what has been called Black Third World Pan-African cinema. Third Eye, London's Festival of Third Cinema, the festival I worked with at the beginning of the 1980s, was one of the festivals that brought African American, Asian, South American and Caribbean films and filmmakers together for that 2-week festival and symposium in London. The race and culture agenda of filmmakers in the UK embraced and found solidarity with those developed and developing film movements that were not only about self-determination and the decolonization of the mind in cooperation in filmmaking, but also about developing aesthetics in the field of cinema, because the industry and its conventions were not apolitical. The desire to engage with this creative endeavor resonated with Black independent filmmakers, often working in opposition to the dominant cinema sectors in the UK, in Europe, North America, the Caribbean, Latin America, the Indian subcontinent. I'm so worried about what was on that screen now. Anyway, also in the UK, the term Black, especially in the 1970s and the 1980s, was a political term that was embraced by not only people of African descent, but many from the Indian subcontinent too, and the two communities worked together in solidarity. So the USP, the unique selling point, I suppose you could say, of my archive is the opportunity to compare and to explore what was happening on those various continents in film around the same time, to explore cross-influences, connections, collaborations between Africa, the Caribbean, Black British cinema, African American cinema. And they were collected. I'd been collecting them as a curator to provide for myself and for others the contextual materials by which you could understand the politics, the national cinemas, the various genres of cinemas, the various movements within Pan-African cinema, and the filmmakers and their styles and their paths of career development. So it was all of this material. And like you, quite a lot of memorabilia, but the archive is a whole range of films, pre-digital, so a lot of them are on tape that haven't yet been digitized, a lot of photographs, audio material, and the photographs tend to be, I mean, obviously I have film stills and more official photographs taken by other people, but my own photographs tend to be snapshots from the various events that I attended. I will put up on the screen the website address where you can actually get a sense of what the archive is about. But the archive itself is not online. It's more a catalogue list that I will be able to put up in the next few months when I've had a chance to tidy it up a bit. I've been working mainly with volunteers. I don't have a staff, and it's been a lot of work. I don't own most of the IP, must say this. So it will be some time before I'm able to put any actual materials, make any materials available online, and they would need to be cleared for that. But I often do provide secondary sources for some materials, and when I do have to present any materials from within the archive, I clear them for those particular occasions. There was talk yesterday about the value of the lived experience of the festivals, and that's definitely a characteristic of this archive. And this afternoon, when the Algerian event festivals were being presented, I remembered that myself and a number of filmmakers were invited to Algiers for the 25th anniversary of that 1969 festival. And so it was in 1994 we were in Algiers for invited, a small group of filmmakers and others invited for that celebration. It wasn't a very, very big celebration, but they made an effort to actually get people representing the various types of people that would have been at the original one. So, they had people like Haile Gerima and Larry Clark, who I think was the filmmaker who was a Panther member back in the day, and Lionel Ngakani from South Africa. So the range of people who were at the original one, the types of people were also invited there. Anyway, for this short presentation, I'm going to try and make it short, but obviously as interesting as I can. I've pulled out some audiovisual material from 3 festivals where, in their very raison d'etre and in their annual expressions of development initiatives, their discussion forums, and in their engagement with local and international audiences, are engaged in the performance of Pan-Africanism. I've worked with all 3 on many occasions and continue to be involved. FESPACO, the Pan-African Film Festival of Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso, a biennial festival of African cinema, started in 1969, the same time as the consolidation of the AU, and obviously around the same time as the festival in Algiers. And it was fired by the continent-wide independence movements of the 1960s and the agendas of nation-building and self-determination. The writer Mbai Cham calls African cinema a child of African political independence. And Clyde Taylor, the writer Clyde Taylor, says that it is the youngest creative practice in Africa. In the same year as FESMAN, the Pan-African Film Festival, the Journée Cinématographique de Carthage, Tunisia, also started. And this year, in fact, later this month, they're celebrating the 50th anniversary in Tunis of the festival started by Taha Sharia. Taha Sharia was a journalist and a cultural activist, and he was a very close friend of Sembène, of Ousmane Sembène, and together as allies, they were the ones behind the existence of these 2 significant festivals on the African continent. Sembène was encouraging the establishment of that second Pan-African Film Festival in Burkina Faso, together with the development of the Pan-African Filmmakers Federation. I started attending FESPACO in 1985, and that was 3 years after the coup that brought Thomas Sankara to power. At that time, although it was a few years after the coup, there was still curfew. So you're attending a film festival and you have to watch the films and get back to your hotel by 10 p.m. At that time, there were national campaigns. He was running national campaigns to build the key infrastructures in the country, and filmmakers attending would, in solidarity, symbolically lay railway track and plant trees. And I have some snapshots of us doing these things with snaps of Sankara and of Sembène, if there's time later on. Under the watch of the visionary young leader of Burkina Faso, Thomas Sankara, impassioned by cinema, and who in particular saw the crucial role that culture would play helping the country, the poorest in the world at that time, and its people to understand and develop their own values and carve its own path to development. The Fanonian concept of decolonizing the mind was going to be crucial, and for Sankara, cinema would have a role to play in shaping that national consciousness. The people would determine their own destiny, and culture would have a crucial role to play in that process. His vision was a Pan-African one, and at the 1987 festival, the Diaspora Prize, the Robeson Prize, was introduced officially into FESPACO. He would be assassinated later that year for the appeal of his ideals, the new Lumumba, that his closest friend and many outside of the continent would not permit. The next FESPACO, next year, in February 2017, will be the 30th anniversary of the diaspora dimension of that festival. I would like to show you, if all works well, a few clips from a film that was made by two Ghanaian filmmakers, Kwate Niuwu and Kwesi Owusu, who were at that festival. It starts with, this is the shoot of the film Sararunya.
In the 1960s, African filmmakers began forging networks on a Pan-African level. Two significant festivals emerged, unique for their encouragement of mass local participation. The Festival of Carthage in Tunisia, North Africa, and FESPACO, the Pan-African Film Festival of Ouagadougou in Burkina Faso.
In Burkina, you have a diversity of cultures, very vibrant cultures. This orientation that is gradually being apprehended by not only Africans, but people who are interested in all aspects of development. This orientation which emphasizes the fundamental role of culture in development is something that I think is taking place in Burkina here.
FESPACO begins. The parachutes come down from the skies. It is a hot afternoon on the edge of the Sahara, and the excitement builds to a climax. 1,000 cheers and chants fill the expectant hill. All eyes on the dancing masquerades, on the cultural workers from all over the world. What a welcome! What homecoming for stories and images unfolding. FESPACO begins. Come close. Let us talk. The circle enlarges. Agendas evoke the past and demand the future. Come close. Let us talk.
Cet exemple qui dit que s'il y a une volonté politique, comme l'argent existe, il est possible.
Sorry, just moving to the next clip. That was, where you will see Thomas Sankara giving the award to Aiketa, the Burkinabe actress who played Queen Sarawinia in the Medhondo film.
Role in the award-winning film Sarawinia by Medhondo.
This is the award ceremony at the end, which was held in the Maison du Peuple in Ouagadougou. And Sankara is giving her the award for that.
Le FESPACO est né de l'initiative de cinéastes africains et de la volonté, bien entendu, du gouvernement burkinabé d'assurer au cinéma africain une certaine promotion à travers un festival qui a lieu tous les 2 ans. C'est ainsi que depuis 1969, les cinéastes se rencontrent à Ouagadougou et essaient de discuter entre eux, de montrer leurs œuvres et à travers la compétition de sortir le meilleur film de la dernière année. En outre, nous pouvons constater que de 10 000 spectateurs en 1969, le FESPACO est passé en 1987 à plus de 400 000 spectateurs, ce qui prouve donc un intérêt, un engouement pour le cinéma africain qui, il y a plusieurs décennies, disait-on, n'intéressait pas les Africains.
Donc le film que je présente à la 10e édition du festival s'intitule Le Choix. En vrai, en langue nationale, c'est Yam.
This section is about the diaspora involvement.
FESPACO finds echoes in the experiences of the African diaspora. Black filmmakers from Europe, the Americas and the Caribbean come to Ouagadougou. They come to share ideas and seek inspiration.
The different pieces valley become real when you become people, meet people, when you see what people are doing. It's a catalyst.
Claire Andrade Watkins, USA.
When it's all real, when you come into contact, I mean, it's our truth.
Louis Messiah, sitting next to her, made the Du Bois documentary. We were all so young then.
So it's very important, I think the work of Sankofa, especially and Black Audio as well, is that we get compared a lot because of the form of our work.
Nadine from the Sankofa Film Workshop in the UK.
I consider our work to be much closer to. I haven't seen it before, but I can now go back and say, no, our work is not like God, it is like we can name names now and labels, and with that, throw that back to people and try and do criticisms of our work in a context that it's not really enough.
Sembène came to London, and in an interview with him, we asked him, where African cinema was going at, specifically about its cultural direction. So it seems to me that in a way, a certain kind of cultural optimism, political optimism, which ushered in, the African cinema that we know in the late 50s and early 60s, has in some ways evaporated. And I'm not saying that negatively, because it seems to me that in the kind of interregnum, you've got other really interesting films, which are beginning to lay grounds for other sorts of purchases on the African reality. And of songs. I suppose the best way of describing the film is to say that it started off as a kind of impressionistic collage of impressions.
We won't do any more of the video clips, but I'd like you to... I was going to play a clip of Harry Belafonte at the Havana Film Festival, but I think what I will do, I'd rather play a sound clip that I have of Professor Stuart Hall at the Image Caribe Film Festival in Martinique, because that was where the Image Caribe Film Festival was held, and Stuart Hall, who was there in 1988 at the first of those festivals, was talking about Caribbean identity. Let me start that first.
Cinematic representation. I speak of the New World presence not as a literal space only, though it is of course that. I speak of the New World presence as the territories of the mind, as an imaginary territory.
Stuart and others on the bus going to this seminar.
I associate this New World presence with that historic break and rupture which has dispersed us from some place of origin, of slavery, of the Middle Passage, of conquest and colonization, and then of an absolutely endless and unstoppable migration. I speak of us as people who not only migrate, but who are essentially migrated. And therefore, we are in some ways destined to repeat that migration as a perpetual motif in Caribbean cultural experience. I refer therefore to the experience of migranthood, of dispersal, of traveling, of moving between different worlds, of moving between different islands and cultures and history, of moving between center and periphery, of moving within the periphery. And these two, rupture and migranthood, making it impossible for me to think of Caribbean cinema as predicated on some final return to an origin which can now be recovered in its essential unity. I emphasize it as dispersal because I think though we don't speak of it often, we know it in the core of our being and consciousness. The sadness of a continual parting, which is part of Caribbean experience, is a triste tropique. And I talk about this New World experience.
Sorry, I think I better stop it there, otherwise we're going to run over too much time. There are images, but we'll see how things go later, or maybe there's some other way I can show them to you. But thank you for your patience, and I hope it's been useful.